In this video, we're looking at how to plot points on a graph. We're going to start with Pirate Pete. Pete wants to dig up his buried treasure, and his map tells him he has to go 4 steps east, then 2 steps north. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, north. And of course, X marks the spot. If we were to show his movement on a grid, it would look like this. If Pirate Pete had a second piece of treasure buried 2 east and 3 north, it would be buried here. Plotting points on a graph is very similar to this. Let's look at an example. Before you start plotting your points, you should have already added on your axes and labels. Instead of east and north, this graph has got height and speed, but we approach it in the same way. We start by looking at the first number in the height column. It's 2. Next, we go to the axis also labelled height and go across until we find the number 2. To keep track of where that is, you can put your finger on it. Our first speed is 4, so what we're going to do is we're going to move upwards until we're level with the number 4 on the speed axis. And this is where we put our cross. After all, X marks the spot. Now we've plotted our first point, we can move on to plotting our second. To do that, we look at the next pair of numbers down. That's a height of 3 and a speed of 4. And we do the same thing as earlier. We move across to the height of 3 and then up to the speed of 4. Now we put our next X. If you're finding it tricky to keep track of which pair you're working on, put a ruler underneath them. Slide it down when you're moving on to the next pair. Okay, let's make it trickier. What do you do if you get a results table like this one? The first thing we have to do is figure out which numbers we're going to use. For height it's obvious, but what about speed? There's lots of repeat readings. We're going to ignore most of the numbers and just use the one in the column labelled mean. So the first point we're going to plot is a height of 10 and a speed of 14. This second pair of numbers is tricky because the numbers we need aren't written on the scales. This is where we're going to need those little lines in between the numbers. And there's 2 ways to work out what each little line is worth. You can use trial and error or you can calculate. Let's use trial and error for the height axis. Pick a start point. 0 is usually the easiest. Then look at the next number. For us, that's 10. We've got to count from 0 and get to 10 by this point here. Let's start by guessing each little mark is worth 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is not 10, so that scale is wrong. How about 2s? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Great, 10 is in the right place, so each little line must be worth 2. The point we're trying to plot is 26, so we're going to go across to 20 and then count up in 2s. 20, 22, 24, 26. And to keep track of where this is, we can put a little mark with our pencil. For the speed axis, let's use the calculating method. We start by picking any 2 numbers next to each other. I'm going to pick 6 and 8. Next, we find the difference between those numbers. 8 take away 6 is 2. So this distance must be worth 2. Now we see how many steps it's divided into. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Finally, we divide the total distance, 2, by how many steps it's divided into, 5. 2 divided by 5 is 0.4. Each little mark must be worth 0.4. The point we're plotting is at 11.2. We go to the nearest number on the scale, 10, and start counting up in 0.4s. 10, 10.4, 10.8, 11.2. Again, put a small mark to keep track. Where the 2 marks meet, we plot our point. So, what are we going to do when the number we're plotting doesn't line up with any of our marks? For example, how are we going to plot 2.5? Our scale is 2, 2.4, 2.8. First, we figure out what halfway between the 2 marks would represent. Halfway between 2.4 and 2.8 is 2.6. Next we think, is our point nearer the middle, one side, or the other? 2.5 is halfway between 2.4 and 2.6. So we draw a cross between the middle and the 2.5 mark. So we'll go up to about here when we plot our point. And that's how to plot points.